Between 1901 and 1906, there were several comprehensive art exhibitions held in Paris that made the works of Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh, Georges Seurat, and Paul Cézanne widely accessible for the first time. For the painters who saw the achievements of these great artists, the effect was one of liberation, and they began to experiment with radical new styles. Fauvism and the Fauves.
Corey Cravata made this!
Two of these painters, Henri Matisse and André Derain, spent the summer of 1905 discussing and experimenting with the various post-impressionist styles of Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Cézanne, and the neo-impressionism of Seurat, Cross, and Signet, and the small fishing port of Colliers near Spain on the Mediterranean coast. While there, Matisse painted Promenade Among the Olive Trees. As you can see, he had not yet developed what would become the Fauve style of constructing his pictures with flat areas of color. As shown here, he was still experimenting, combining neo-impressionist blocks of color and dabs and squiggles of pigment applied with variously sized brushstrokes. At the same time, Derain painted fishing boats Colliers. Drawing heavily on the influence of Vincent van Gogh, Derain's heavily outlined forms present a dense, all-over pattern dominated by the overlapping sails that cross the picture diagonally. At the lower left, two figures watch the fishermen at work on the shore. Beyond the multicolored sails are the sea, rising mountains, and a brief expanse of sky. The topography of the landscape can be identified, but Derain attempts no verisimilitude of space or color. When their works were displayed later that year at the Salon des Tombes in Paris, the art critic Louis Valset described their show of work in the magazine Gil Blas with the phrase Donatello à milieu des fauves, which translated to Donatello among the wild beasts, contrasting their paintings with a Renaissance-style sculpture that shared the room with them. Later, this insult towards their work was adopted by the artists themselves. While their movement was born on the shores of Colliers, Fauvism was named in Gil Blas on October 17, 1901. Valset wasn't the only critic that was less than impressed with the work of the Fauvists. The critic Camille Maclair stated, "A pot of paint has been flung in the face of the public," when describing Matisse's Woman with a Hat. In intensity and immediacy of expression, Henri Matisse never surpassed Woman with a Hat, a portrait of his wife Amélie. The painting caused shock and outrage when it was shown at the Salon des Tombes in Paris. Matisse used deliberate disharmonies of red, green, orange, purple, and blue. Modeling in the face is created inversely, with green the complementary of flesh tones. There is no drawing as such. Contours are little more than ragged edges between planes of color, and the whole is brushed, especially in the background and toward the sides, with a crudity scarcely seen before. However, beneath the violence can be seen a plan in the progressions and recalls of color that betray Matisse's instinctual sensitivity. The Fauves were a loosely shaped group of artists sharing a similar approach to nature, but they had no definitive program. As previously stated, Matisse, the group's nominal leader, arrived at this style after experimenting with post-impressionist and neo-impressionist styles of Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Seurat. These influences inspired him to reject traditional three-dimensional space and seek instead a new picture space defined by the movement of color planes. Matisse's work would demonstrate this rejection of tradition for the remainder of his life until his death on November 3, 1954. Another major Fauve was Maurice de Vlaminck, who might be called a natural Fauve because his use of highly intense color corresponded to his own exuberant nature. Vlaminck took the final step toward embracing the Fauve style after seeing the second large retrospective exhibition of Van Gogh's work at the Salon des Independents in the spring of 1905, and the Fauve paintings produced by Matisse and Derain in Colliers. He said shortly after that he loved Van Gogh more than his own father, and he began to work by squeezing paint directly from the tube onto the canvas. Vlaminck's The Head of Derain, shown life-size and extreme close-up, is more vivid than any photograph could be. There's no indication of surrounding space. Vlaminck boldly outlined in black the contours of the head, hair, shoulders, and collar. Then he painted the face red, highlighting rather than modeling the facial features with strokes of vivid chrome yellow and a daring patch of green on the nose. Both eyes have blue lids, and the blue mustache spirals out to the left. Derain kept this portrait until his death in 1954. Vlaminck and his friend Derain had shared a studio on the Ile de Chateau since 1901, forming what has been called the School of Chateau. Their painting style, characterized by bright colors and bold brushstrokes, became the harbinger of Fauvism. In this work, the river scene at Chateau, Vlaminck used the primary colors of blue, red, and white, applying them directly from the tube in daubs and swirls of pigment. As an artist, Derain occupied a place midway between his friends, the impetuous Vlaminck and the more controlled Matisse. He had worked with Vlaminck in Chateau near Paris intermittently from 1900 on School of Chateau, and spent the summer of 1905 with Matisse in Colliers. In 1906, he also painted some 15 scenes of London in a more restrained palette. In this view of Regent Street, near Oxford Circle, his palette is more restrained, consisting primarily of subdued blues and strategically placed scarlets. Contemporary photographs of Regent Street show that Derain did not exaggerate. The streets and sidewalks were jammed, the population of the city having reached nearly 400,000 by that time. Other important Fauvists were Kees van Dongen, Charles Camoin, Henri Charles Manguin, Alphonse Fries, Louis Veltat, and George Rouault. These were joined in 1906 by Georges Braque and Rouault Duffy. For most of these artists, Fauvism was a transitional learning stage. By 1908, a revived interest in Paul Cézanne's vision of the order and structure of nature had led many of them to reject the turbulent emotionalism of Fauvism in favor of the logic of Cubism. Braque became the co-founder with Picasso of Cubism. Derain, after a brief flirtation with Cubism, became a widely popular painter in a somewhat neoclassical manner. Matisse alone pursued the course he had pioneered, achieving a sophisticated balance between his own emotions and the world he painted.